Please welcome Steve Spiro.
I was a shy kid, quiet, and as a young adult, I wasn't just introverted. I was professionally awkward, so much so that a mentor challenged me to meet 3 strangers every day. Now, who's thinking stranger danger? Anyone? Yeah, insane, right? Well, in an attempt to follow his instructions, one day while I was at the diner, I saw someone who looked friendly and safe enough. And so I approached him. And as I did, he went to the bathroom, so I followed. Here we are at the urinal, and I broke the ice and started speaking with him. Now, keep in mind, the unspoken rule at the urinal is look straight ahead and don't say anything. Well, regardless, he was nice enough to speak to me, and we actually even exchanged phone numbers. Crazy, right? It really happened. Awkward, you know? Well, later that night, actually after midnight, I get a phone call on my cell phone. It's like, Steve, hey, Steve, this is Jimmy. I like the way you look. Meet me here at the motel. Not exactly the encounter I was hoping for. I was looking for a new connection, not a hookup. But that encounter, as awkward and wild as it was, cracked something open in me. It taught me something important. Connection is messy. People are unpredictable. But growth, it lives where fear lives. And for those of us that aren't naturally outgoing, those uncomfortable, awkward moments are where transformation begins. You know, these days people call me the master connector, not because I was born social, not because I love small talk, but because I made a decision to stop hiding and start engaging. You know, that challenge to meet 3 strangers every day, it helped me build a massive network, but it also has changed my life. But this talk isn't just about me. It's about those of us that are more comfortable in our own minds than in the crowds, the introverts, and how we, not despite, but because of our wiring, can become the most powerful connectors in the room. I'm thankful because there was a lot of people in my life that helped me get out of my comfort zone, and through that, helped me leverage some of my introverted skills to listen and observe, to wait and speak. So let me take you back and paint a picture for you. Not only was I a shy kid, but I was picked on, bullied, learning disabled, and dyslexic. I was overlooked and afraid to speak up. My friends growing up were characters on TV. Captain Kirk from Star Trek, and Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners, and Felix Unger from The Odd Couple. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Yeah, blast for the past, right? Avoidance became my defense. But at some point I realized that while safety keeps us from pain, it also keeps us from connection. You know, fast forward years later when my mentor challenged me to meet 3 strangers every day. Listen, that's like asking somebody who's afraid of heights to go bungee jumping. And keep in mind, I was in the New York City area. Has anyone tried talking to a stranger in the streets of New York? It's a place where you feel like you're going to get shot, kidnapped, or killed. So awkwardly, uncomfortably, I stepped out, and slowly I changed. You know, for a long time, I thought I had to be someone else, you know, bold, loud, charismatic, like my mentor. But I always felt like an imperfect version of him. Then one day I read a book called Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. It speaks about the rite of passage a boy needs to go through with his father to become a healthy young man and eventually well-functioning adult. I never had that experience with my dad. He was always working. We barely played catch. He never taught me how to fight or how to talk to girls. He wasn't a bad dad. He was just absent. I later found out that he was bullied as a kid as well. There was a hole in me that really never got addressed until one day I saw my sister's therapist. He was a man of faith and deep wisdom. And after a few sessions, he said to me, Steve, I've got a lot of people that sit right there where you're sitting, and they're messed up. But I've listened to you and all you've accomplished. You're awesome. You know, that one moment of affirmation, It filled the hole. For years, I've heard this phrase, you'll always be a second-class somebody else, but you'll only be a first-class you. That finally sank in. Introverts, we don't chase attention. We observe, we notice, we feel when the room shifts. And in moments of stillness, we see what others miss. I remember back in my marketing days, I was during a brainstorming session, voices flying, the whiteboard was full, and people were just focusing on a logo. I stayed silent, kept out of the fray, and then I asked one question. I said, guys, why are we focusing on the color of the logo? Shouldn't we be talking about what's in it for the consumer? That one quiet moment and question reframed the entire discussion. Not because I needed to be heard, but because I was able to be silent, able to keep my eye on the big picture without speaking first. Susan Cain writes in her book, Quiet, introverts often find strength in environments that value depth over volume. And Harvard's 80-plus year study on happiness says this: the clearest way to find well-being in life is the quality of relationships, not noise, quality, not quantity, exactly how us introverts are wired to do well. Introverts tend to have fewer relationships, but those few tend to be deeper connection. Hey, remember back in 2020 during the lockdown, the pandemic, anyone? Yeah, you're trying to forget it like I am. It's crazy times. But during that time of isolation, I met a young man through social media. After a few thoughtful conversations, you could tell he was floundering, no real direction, struggling personally and professionally. But we stayed in touch. We had ongoing conversations and some deep, meaningful discussions. He began to open up, and eventually he grew and started to grow and change. Today, he's got a bright future ahead. A strong career, a business he's building, a great woman by his side, and a deep spiritual foundation. It's not magic, it's connection. Because when you show up for others, you encourage them to show up for themselves and the people in their lives. That's the art of human connection. Let me ask you, is life easy? Nah, it ain't easy. Us introverts, we rather stay in our own head and also we're more in our own routine, comfortable that way. But staying small doesn't just shrink our world, it shrinks our impact. I've learned it's all about overcoming and to share that with others, because connection brings what comfort never can. It allows us to grow both personally and professionally. We gain a sense of belonging. Psychologists tell us this: introverts often they build deeper, more meaningful relationships. We retain information better during conversations. We help create safety through our presence, not performance. So how do we, as introverts, outconnect the rest? And listen, you extroverts, it'll help you too. Do these 4 things. 1, lead with listening. Ask one real meaningful question. Be curious. 2, follow up with intention. Be the one who remembers. Remember their names, what they told you, their birthdays, their significant others' names, their family members. 3, focus on depth over volume. 1 meaningful conversation is better than 10 superficial ones. And move at your own pace. Slower isn't weaker, it's wiser. Brené Brown reminds us that vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. That's not just science, that's truth. So what are you going to do the next time you walk into a room? Well, don't try to be the most interesting person. Be the most interested person. Ask one meaningful question, stay present, and listen like it matters, because it really does. Connection doesn't begin with charisma, it begins with care. Does the future of connection belong to the boldest voice? No, I don't think so. No, it belongs to the most honest ones, to the ones that lead with quiet confidence, to those who listen with their whole heart, to the ones who show up as they are and encourage others to do the same. Your quiet isn't something to overcome. It's your strength. It's your edge. It's your power. It's how you can out-connect the rest. Thank you.